My name is Janene Gentile. I'm an abstract expressionist painter. What painting means to me is really a way to express myself in a non-verbal way. And painting has been something that's always been my choice of creating since I was a young child, by using finger paints, by playing with crayons. I wasn't one to color within the lines in a coloring book, but create my own picture. So a lot of it came from really wanting to create this world that I felt inside. As I grew older, I like to look at other artists that influenced me during the 60s and 70s and 80s. The artists that probably most influenced me were musicians, not so much as painters, but listening to the works of Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Hawkwind, as I was painting, to be influenced and listening to the social messages of Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, and internalizing lots of the challenges that we were dealing with. It would come out in my paintings. They might be very aggressive. They might be very felt disorganized. And I began my undergraduate studies at Fordham University, the Lincoln Center campus. I was probably in my mid-20s when I began my undergraduate studies. I want to explore the world of art. Though I wasn't that interested in so much of learning the academics of art, but I was very interested of the history of art and learning how it influenced societies throughout the ages. So at Fordham, I began really as a liberal arts student and then moved into art education. And much of my art was a good sampling of using many different techniques, whether it be black and white photography, color photography, Cibachrome at that point, design, studio painting, drawing. And most of the studios at Fordham were pretty well equipped. We would study in a class of probably 15 students. All the professors there were pretty well known. A sculpture class that I took that I really enjoyed very much, it was more steel and found objects, and I believe Frank Steller at that time was really becoming known within the city arts, and I was very impressed with Frank Steller's work and of tearing down and rebuilding wrecked cars, wrecked pieces of metal, and so what I learned from Frank Steller, watching his work be put together, was I began taking the canvas and ripping the canvas and tearing it apart and re-sewing it back on and staying in a monotone color. Part of also my studies was looking through the camera lens, which also gave me a really good perspective on seeing the world through the lens and focusing on just that object or that moment. It was a beautiful way to reframe your work and really look at it in a manner of focus. I wasn't a realistic painter, nor was I a realistic in taking photographs. So much of the imagery was very either distorted or very taken a spot or a color or a shadow that I was interested in. And during that time also of the late 70s, it was early 80s, going to Fordham, I also began to develop more as a performance artist, and my paintings were being incorporated in environments. My particular work was starting to evolve into body imagery, and the strength of women. So, so much of the paintings became part of an environment that was also layers and layers of sound, layers of the audience was participating within that environment. So it was exciting to see that happen and feel that. It was during also the time of Keith Haring, and graffiti artists were starting to be recognized in the city, and their stuff was popping off the walls. The Guerrilla Girls were also very impactful in the world of art, because Soho was beginning to show much of avant-garde artists, but it was mostly males. So part of what us as women were really getting out there and trying to get all our stuff off of neat little pieces of canvas and put them on walls and put them in places where we could be seen and almost be disruptive. And as my studies evolved in Fordham University, I decided to go on. I was being encouraged by professors to go on to work on my master's. So I decided to stay in New York. I had an apartment, which was my studio in the Lower East Side. And I was working again with urban kids in the Bronx and really having a great time, and very alive, very exciting. And so I decided to go to NYU and studied in the School of Professional Arts and Sciences. Went on to, again, continue with studio work, be influenced a lot by Italian art and Italian artists. I studied in Venice, Italy for a semester, which I had an amazing time. And I was doing more, again, not pretty little paintings on canvas, but they were sheets. They were actually linen sheets, and painting them, tearing them, sewing them, putting them back together, and developing a way to hang them was also very important, is how you were going to display these pieces to your audience and reframe them where they're acceptable pieces of art. I studied and showed my art throughout Venice that particular summer. And what I want from my audience is really just to find pleasure from seeing them, from viewing them. They can find meaning in it, in their own manner, their own what it means to them, what it means. The colors feel very different to different people. Red can be rage, or red could be luck. Yellow could be happiness, or yellow could feel like maybe a dark day. So it's very important to me that I keep creating this particular world that has a place in time, whether the message be, again, we'll talk about the social aspects of the 60s and change and revolution, to the 70s and 80s, as life for me on a very personal level began to mature. So much of my paintings started to slow down, and life gets in the way of creating, and so the paintings became a lot softer and a lot less frequent. But as time moved on, I started creating more and more by developing smaller works. They were easier to manage in my daily life. So on a very, again, individual basis, when I had to deal with a family, which is part of the group, the space became smaller, so the paintings became smaller. Now, as I've gotten older, my space is becoming more open, so I'm feeling that urge again to move those paintings in a bigger place. So many of the artists also that have influenced me over my past years has been like Frank Stella, Andy Warhol, even though much of their art may be different from my art, but I found a connection when I looked at the art. Louise Nivelson, much of learning the scientific approach to color, whether I use it or remember it when I'm applying the paint is a whole other story, because I don't know if I'm actually that conscious of what works in color schemes, but what feels good, what expression I want to bring out, what in that painting. It's not unusual to look at other people's work and wish and say, geez, they're really clear and they're really saying it. I wish I could be as clear as they are. I wish that my work was as clear as Kandinsky, or as clear as Miro, and as magical and as lyrical and as spiritual. And reading about their lives was important for me as I grew and matured in my art. It wasn't so important in the very beginning stages because I wanted to do. I was in a frenzy to do and to create and to be. But as I began to breathe and relax and discover and uncover and explore that there are other artists who go through the same emotions or the same conflicts or the same challenges, to watch how they evolved in the art. It could be Vincent van Gogh, from the Potato People to his Blue Period, till his application of his sunflowers, the Starry, Starry Night. And you'll see that in a lot of the colors in my paintings, the power and the fury of what yellow looks like next to pink. So much of how this all evolved is really doing and being, and that's what worked for me, is really a sense of, to me, is who I am and how I connect with the world. Paint application itself could be just simple as primary colors. It could be just what's in front of me, and I decide I've seen a blush of a pink that I liked during the day, and it stayed with me, and I wanted to create that blush somewhere on the painting, or I wanted to create that tension or that aggression. I try very, very hard not to use black, and black as a color or as a pigment. I find it too overpowering in my paintings. You'll see some that'll almost look black, but if you look very hard, they'll be either a deep, deep purple or a burnt umber. But much of what I try is not for one gesture on the painting to take over. I want the forms to blend in, to live next to each other. And it isn't necessarily in harmony. It could be in disharmony. And what's happening to me internally as I'm painting, all of these feelings and all of these emotions is happening while I'm applying it to the canvas. And I could go back to that canvas 3 days later. I can go back to some of the canvases years later and say, geez, I never really got that feeling right, that tension between the forms. So I'll go back and rework it and rework it and rework it. So much of the materials I use is what I have around, or what I might see in my daily life. I might be walking around seeing a particular color over and over and over again. A sunrise, a sunset, a gloomy day, again, a blush of a cheek, or a gesture of a hand, or a dance. Or I may be, in my mind, transposing music into motion on the painting. But I'm not conscious I'm doing that. It's just a rhythm coming, or a melody over and over and over and over again, and bringing it back in and bringing it back out, changing it. And then when I'm tired of it, that's it. That's how the paintings change. I've felt I've had it with that gesture. I've had it with that motion. I've had it with that palette. That's it. It's over. What happens when I'm painting is, again, a very spontaneous reaction to color and gesture. I could work on 3 paintings at a time. I could create different textures by just walking around the room and seeing, I like the grid of something and doing an overspray on it with spray paint, and like that, and say, all right, I'm going to leave that alone for 2 days or 3 days. I just want to look at it. I just want to live with it. It's really living with it. And then going to another piece and right next door and opening it up again and bringing out those textures. Trying to create is not a good feeling, but a feeling, whether that it be in any type of emotion, anger, love, sadness. It evokes something in the audience. But for me, all of that's going on. Gesturally, when I'm applying, I'm using rags, I'm excited to see how my paintings and my art's going to move. So painting is my life. Painting is part of my essence. That's the most pleasure I would get from my paintings, is to them to be hung in places, either in my friends' homes or studios or people I don't know, just to have them to have the pleasure of the painting. So my studios have always been the places where I've lived, slept, ate. Where I live now is a bigger house on Long Island, New York, and I use a basement. That's my studio now. I would hope to bring that out of the basement soon and come into the light. My ideal studio, oh boy, my ideal studio would probably be a vaulted barn, heated barn, with a wonderful smell of barn wood and pine. And I would have running water that would be hot and cold water. I would have a shower, probably a tub. And I'd live in that beautiful, well-lit barn with a big, big sky to look out on, and have someone come in my studio and clean up and make my stuff very orderly and organized. I'd have interns to lay out my canvases and clean my brushes and make sure my work doesn't get muddy.